this because he happens to live in New Orleans, but as you can tell, it's a completely appropriate choice. Bill was a signer to the statement that we circulated in the Humanist and at the conference in San Jose 2 years ago called "Crimes Are Crimes No Matter Who Does Them." A controversial statement at that point, to be sure, identifying the ways in which the Obama administration has in fact been worse than what George Bush did. 2 years later, I would have to say I not only stand foursquare with that statement, but unfortunately what we predicted and worried about in that statement, the development of a hit list by the Obama administration for target assassination, has actually come true. And we know that 3 American citizens have been killed by Obama administration targeted strikes in Yemen. We know that hundreds and hundreds of other people who are human beings, even though they're not American citizens, have been killed in Yemen and Pakistan, Somalia, Libya, Iraq, and Afghanistan through the development of this new form of the war on terror, which is the campaign run by 2 parts of the U.S. government, the military and the CIA, of sustained drone strikes in these 6 countries, all of which are sovereign countries, 4 of which have not had wars declared upon them by this government. So we have the act of aggressive war by the United States government having taken place 6 times in the last 11 years. World Can't Wait's approach on this is the organization that Marilee mentioned. I helped to start in 2005 after the second Bush selection of 2004, was that we didn't have to sit on our hands and wait to see what kind of change was going to come, but that we needed to drive out the Bush regime. And our idea was not primarily to have George Bush voted out, but to see George Bush and Dick Cheney dispatched forthwith in disgrace for the crimes that they committed against humanity. And we did an intense job of documenting those crimes so that we could talk about a whole picture that was not only limited to aggressive war and torture, but surveillance on the domestic population and a whole string of other things that had to do with the establishment of a theocracy inside the government, most applicable to the treatment of women and to the treatment of immigrants. This has all been a huge learning process, as you all know. We've been through the last 7 years, coming to a situation that I don't think and I know for certain that many of our colleagues did not suspect was coming, where we have a government now that is able to do things without protest when many of us were outraged and in the streets when the previous administration did them. And I want to concentrate on one part of this and then invite Bill to help us look at another part. One part of this is the development of this drone war. It is not that drones themselves are inherently a worse technology than nuclear bombs or gas or all the things that have been used in the previous world wars. But there's a specificity here. It's being sold to the American public and to the citizens of the rest of the Western world as a painless way to carry out war. U.S. troops aren't involved. The targets are carefully picked by name and surgically taken out. Well, this is just not true. First of all, if you want to start with the people most being victimized by the drones, there's a civilian population in Pakistan, for an example, which is being completely terrorized by these drones, which fly overhead for days and weeks, have extremely sophisticated technology on board that can see through walls, for instance, can read heat through walls. There is no hiding from these drones, and when they strike, they obliterate buildings and human bodies. So that's one part of it. The second most horrifying thing, and we saw this past week in Pakistan, 3 drone strikes in the same place, 3 days in a row. The second drone strike and the third drone strike, we believe, targeted rescuers and mourners. This is a conscious policy by our government. And of course, the press releases from the Pentagon always read that X number of insurgents were killed. But then we look into the press reports and we learn that the definition of an insurgent in Pakistan right now is anyone killed by a U.S. drone strike. There's circular logic going on. And Bill and I have been talking this morning about people we know in the Obama administration who were colleagues when Bush was in power, in defending Guantanamo detainees, and in criticizing the aggressive war of the Bush administration, who are now working for the Obama administration, conflicted as they may be in defending these policies. And the crucial part I think we need to know as people who care about humanity is that there's a role for us within this. If people around the rest of the world, not to mention people who live in our country, don't hear that there's a substantial opposition to what's being done by our government in our name, they are not going to know that people in this country are against it. They're not going to see it. They're not going to hear it. We, as it is, have to worm our way into the media. And again, I deeply appreciate the American Humanist Association for even taking on these issues, because this is one way of putting this in front of the population. But as we say in World Can't Wait, humanity and the planet come first. Stop the crimes of our government. So we'd mainly like to have a conversation with folks, and I'm going to stop talking just now, but I want to bring Bill up to talk about the whole piece of the war on terror that involves Guantanamo, which undoubtedly all of you know a great deal about, but also some other features of the indefinite detention. And then I want to let you know, after Bill speaks, we're going to show a video that you may or may not have seen, but it is the first release from Wikileaks. It came out in April of 2010. This was the Apache helicopter attack that killed 11 civilians in Iraq, including 2 journalists from Reuters. This happened in 2007, but it wasn't released to the world as a video until 2010. This is the footage that a young man who's in the U.S. Army named Bradley Manning is currently undergoing a long, tortuous court-martial process because the government says that he is responsible for leaking this footage. So after Bill speaks, we'll look at this footage together, and I'm warning you, we do show edited versions to high school and college classes, and it is very difficult to watch. But I do feel it's important for us to come face to face with reality and to grapple with the implications of what our government is doing. So that's why I think it's important to watch. Then we'll open it up for conversation. So Bill Quigley. Thanks.
Thanks for taking the time. My name is Bill Quigley, and I've been a lawyer for 30-some years. I teach at Loyola Law School here in New Orleans, and the last couple of years I was the general counsel, legal director for the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York City. I'm going to do just two little parts of this, and then we'll get on to the film. Those parts are the role that the United States plays in the world, and even at home, but in indefinite detention and torture. If you're like me, and I can see that a lot of people in this room are, is that, when we grew up, we were sort of told that, we did things differently in this country, and that we had a different approach, and that we followed the law, and we were more fair, and we were more just than any other country, and that may have been true at some points. But I tell you right now, the United States, our circumstances of Guantanamo. There's still nearly 200 people in Guantanamo, the majority of whom have been officially declared as being no reason to keep them in Guantanamo. Officially declared by the government, not by us who represent people in Guantanamo. They've said that they can be released, but the Obama administration joined with the Republicans saying that we can't, even though there's nothing going on, we can't just release them because politically it would be too difficult to release folks. And so they have to be released to a country that actually is willing to accept them. And most countries right now are saying, well, you did this. You created these people. You picked them up. You've held them for years and years and years in these terrible circumstances. And you want to drop them in our country now? That doesn't really seem fair. So what the United States is doing, honestly, is we are bribing small countries around the world, by and large, to Albania, Cape Verde, other places like this, to give them X amount of money, and they will take one or two of these folks off our hand. But we don't expect anybody to be released here before the election, because this is clearly part of the whole political dimension of the war on terror. So we have, dozens of people in Guantanamo, but you realize that no new people have come to Guantanamo. The current administration promised to close it. They clearly didn't close it. Now they have no plans even to close it. But there's no new people coming. So where are the people? Where's the stream of people that would have come to Guantanamo? Well, Debra pointed out one group, and that is the group that the United States is assassinating around the world. And as you know, old enough to know that assassination by the CIA was practiced for some time, but then was declared illegal, and has been officially declared illegal since President Reagan, President Ford, others like that. It's been illegal for some time. So, of course, we don't call it assassination anymore, but we're killing people in countries around the world, in part so we don't have to bring them to Guantanamo, because we don't know what to do there. So we have killed thousands of people directly around the world, supposedly, who are terrorist suspects. A lot of people who have investigated this think that there probably were some people who were assassinated who were involved as members of terrorist organizations, but a lot of civilians as well. But in addition to that, the United States, maintains a special prison in Afghanistan, and this is openly at Bagram Air Force Base. And what we have done there is that the military and the government have decided, look, they never expected anybody in Guantanamo to ever have any rights, any constitutional rights or that. And so they brought them to Guantanamo because they thought that the U.S. Constitution didn't apply there. The Supreme Court said, yeah, at least it's going to apply a little bit there. They're going to have a right to have some hearings and that sort of stuff. So anyway, the prison in Afghanistan has thousands. Debra said before 6,000. Sometimes it's hard to find out the numbers, because what it is, it's a hybrid prison that's technically owned by the government of Afghanistan, but it's administered by the United States military. And as a consequence, the government has been successful in saying, well, the U.S. Constitution doesn't apply to people who are in Afghanistan jails that's run by the country of Afghanistan. So there's a fiction going on there in terms of that. But thousands of people there in a prison that we have built, we staff, and that to try to keep them. And there's no plans to ever give them any trials or anything like that. So those are thousands there. And that's not to count the secret places that the United States still has. And those come about every once in a while. We find out there's a place in Poland. We find out that there's a place in other countries. They usually don't have thousands of people in them, but they do have places for that they keep people for a little while. So a little while is whatever. So what happens in these places, and why not just let the law apply to them? Well, the reason is that if you remember the stories about early years of Guantanamo, is that our CIA and our civilian contractors tortured people. And you know what torture means. We all know the waterboarding. Some people put down and they're made to feel like they are drowning dozens of times. I think one of the worst things that I heard was the role of the medical professionals. There's a group of medical professionals who say, look, you know, the lawyers and the torturers and those people, at least there's some efforts at accountability, but do you understand the role of the medical profession in this? And the role of the medical profession is that there are a slew of psychiatrists, psychologists, and medical doctors on staff at Guantanamo. They interview people along with the interrogators. And the one that I heard, which is one of the worst, I'll tell you what's the second worst first, is that, you know, in Islam and that there are prohibitions on being touched or touching women. So, of course, they have women interrogators who put their hands on people, put their hands down their clothes, rub up against people to make their religion uncomfortable, their person uncomfortable, and that stuff to disequalize people, even to the extent of smearing people with menstrual blood. And this is not something the ACLU made up or that. This is Congress testimony in that. So these are all done things. But the worst that I heard was, in addition to the outright challenges of people, is that after a period of time, this one guy, they found out that he had two phobias. Now, all of us have phobias, right? There's always some little thing that just drives us up a wall, whatever it is. We all have, there's a million different kinds. Well, they found out that he had two phobias. One was claustrophobia, which is fairly common, you know, just too close. And the other is a phobia of roaches. And so what they did to this man was that they brought in a little box, a wooden box, and they forced him into this box and then padlocked the box so that he was in that. And all he had in the box was a square in the top. So they turned out all the lights in that. But then they brought people in to drop roaches into the box that he was in. And of course he was screaming, he was crying, he was literally what we used to call nervous breakdown. But that was something that we discovered his worst fears through the process of interrogation and all that. And then medically determined and militarily determined to use his worst fears to try to break him down, to make him be in a position where he would be more cooperative with interrogators. And at the end result, you know, we had 800 and something people in Guantanamo. 600 or so have been released. And half the people there now we would release, but we don't know politically what to do with them. Are there some people there who are going to be charged and tried? Yes, there are. But not everybody. So you combine the drone strikes against thousands of people, the indefinite detention of thousands more, the prevalence of torture against thousands of people by our employees, and then the idea that this happens with Republicans and Democrats. You realize that this is not a political party issue. This is a United States issue. This is an American issue. This is our issue. And so part of, I think, our individual responsibility is to try to find out the truth. And this is truth, the drone stuff in the New York Times last week, extensive thing explaining how that was done. Bagram, New York Times, in the last week or so. This is not some super secret things the United States is open. In fact, as you see now, the little investigation, because they think that the Obama administration is leaking the stuff about the drones and detention for political gain. That this is actually going to show Obama is tough enough to continue to be the President of the United States. So not only are we not ashamed of it, it's people trying among us to use this for political gain, which I think is a horrible reflection, not on Democrats or Republicans only, but on us, that we are allowing that to happen. So with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and show the video with that as the background. You should know, too, that this